Hi, this is Ed from Wright. Today is the day before Thanksgiving of 2021. The world has changed in many ways. We've all faced many challenges, but I think if we look back, we have a whole lot to be thankful for. And we're thankful to you as our customers that you entrust us with your hard-earned money, with buying your equipment from us, and the support that we give to you. We very, very much appreciate that. Now, today's topic, I want to talk about supply chains. And we've talked about this a couple times over the past year and a half or so. But every time the nuances change, and the nuances are different today, and I want to dig into that. And the bottom line here is that going into spring, I want to be sure that you're getting what you need at the best price, and that you don't end up with, lack of equipment or whatever. But let me start with where supply chains have come from and where I see them going. So first off, there's been several phases. About a year and a half ago, we began seeing the largest early signs of this, which was raw material was hard to get. It was hard to get basic stuff like plate steel and lumber and just really basic stuff, right? Basic raw material. And that was somewhat because sort of through COVID, a lot of raw material suppliers pulled back on the reins. They weren't sure where the economy was going, and so demand went up and supply went down, and there were shortages. We called them shortages then. I don't call them shortages today anymore because now the problem is different. Certainly there's a shortage of items and products, but it's really more capacity and logjam related things. Well, the second phase of what happened there went from raw materials to then work in process with so many of our suppliers got pulled through, and then we saw the secondary effects of them not being able to get their raw material in. And so that was with your kind of middle complex components started slowing down or being hard to get. And actually some of that has turned through, not so much of an issue anymore in terms of that whip related stuff. The third phase was where we ran into import related issues. And so that's, you've heard that there's so many boats out in California waiting to clear the docks and all that kind of thing. And you'd think that, mowers are mostly made in China, but we'll talk about that in just a second. But imports became the issue. And it's still a little bit of the issue, but probably not the main issue. And now we're in the third leg of this, which is base capacity. All right, so let's break down some of those issues that we face today. First off, I call it the head of the snake, okay? This snake of material that was coming in overseas, it was behind. The head of the snake is here, so we have what's coming in, what we need, and all the rest of that body of that snake is in the ports and on the ocean and all those other kinds of things. So although through the last month or so, the number of boats out in California went from 70 to 100, and that makes the issue sound worse, it's actually not that worse for us because the head of the snake has arrived. Our lead times are longer for imported items, but they're now flowing through. And so that's a good thing that we're seeing. This is really the earliest signs of it. So we're not really sure how quickly those issues will drop off, but that's what's going on there. Now let's talk about dependency, okay? So the way reliability math works is you take the reliability of every element to the power of how many elements they are. So let me draw that out, okay? So if our suppliers are 99.99% reliable, and we need 700 parts, say, to make a mower, the 700th power, huge exponential here, okay? What we end up with here is a 93% production schedule reliability. Now, because of this really exponential relationship here with component reliability, what happens is if our suppliers go down to 99% reliable, daily component availability, we'll say, so less than 1% lower, to the 700th power, our possibility of creating a mower goes down to 0.1% chance, right? The number of parts that it takes to make something is the issue. When we talk about imported content, it's not that our mowers have very many pieces that come from China or from overseas. It's just that it puts a kink in the works. It log jams it because of the number of pieces that are required all show up at the same time on the same day. Another way to put that, okay, Let's say you have a combination lock, okay? It has 3 tumblers in it. We'll say it has 999 possibilities, okay? If we add a 4th tumbler to this, you could say that it's 25% more difficult to pick because there's 25% more tumblers. However, it's to the 10th power, okay? Now you have 9,999 options. So it goes up by tenfold, not by 25%. If you put 700 tumblers on that lock, that's what production environment is today. We need all those 700 things to be perfect in order to hit that combination. And when you multiply them all together, even 1% reduction in supplier component availability will completely shut down the ability to produce anything. That's the crux of the issue. Now, related import issues, how do you get around those kinds of things? Well, you look at other ways. We've actually moved a number of components from overseas to the U.S. We're in Maryland. Pennsylvania is one of the largest industrial states near us. And so we've moved a number of components into Pennsylvania to support our production. Traditionally with supply chain, you look at cost, quality, and delivery, and when everything's flowing smoothly, cost is what traditionally has ruled. Long time ago, we were bringing in a certain amount of material from overseas in the late 90s and early 2000s. As a young engineer at the time, I was fairly involved with reshoring a ton of material back to the U.S. And since that time, we've continued to buy more and more things from the U.S., and that's even increased more this past year. So we've got dependency going on. The other thing that's happening is the imbalance that's happening in our supply chain. Okay, so let's say we have supplier 1, supplier 2, supplier 3, supplier 4, supplier 5, supplier 6. Then we've got manufacturer 1, and we'll make it a simple example by saying manufacturer 2, okay? So this supplier is giving all these supplies to this manufacturer, okay? And then this one is also feeding that, okay? Now, what happens here is this supplier has more orders than they can deliver. So they say, okay, well, we're going to give a little more of our parts to this company than this one because they've traditionally bought more pieces. And then this company over here says, well, for some reason, we're going to give these people a little more pieces than this company, okay? And if there's any imbalance in these components flowing down to these manufacturers, then what happens is this manufacturer will have too many of one part and not enough of the other part. This one will also have too many of one part and not enough of the other piece. So between them, they both can't produce at full capacity. These guys could be producing at 100%, and down here, they could be producing at 90%, or 50%, or some other number, right? Because they're only getting half of the other amount. It's that these components are not all flowing evenly. They're imbalanced between the different manufacturers. So although demand is up, most manufacturers are producing less than 100% of their actual capacity. And that is a collision course for spring. That's my point here. There's low inventories and high demand for equipment, and production is actually lower than 100%. Okay, so with that going on, this issue is probably mostly resolved. This will continue being an issue for a long time. This will probably be an issue for 6 months or whatever. The other issue that we're running into is what I call base capacity. Base capacity is just that even if everything is flowing evenly through here, you're now up against issues where there's a factory that just can't produce more components. There is some machinery somewhere that's at capacity, and bringing more machinery in takes 1 to 2 years. So base capacity, it's really the biggest issue with especially the engine manufacturers, transmission manufacturers. It's hard for them to double production overnight. That's just really not possible in that kind of an industry. So we're up against base capacity with many of these companies, and we will be up against base capacity for probably well over a year. So these issues will resolve. This will remain. We'll probably stop talking about supply chain. It'll be less noticeable when these kinds of things begin to level out in 6 months. But base capacity probably will still limit production outputs through next fall, going into 2023. Okay, so now what? What does this mean to you? One is price. So there are prices that are still flowing through supply chain that will result in equipment prices continue to rise through the spring. And with that comes a lot of different nuances that are different than typically have happened in our industry. Typically in our industry, prices flow through at the time they were items were ordered. But right now, typically prices are effective the date something is sold because it's flowing through the channel so quickly. In other words, if you pre-order a truck, it's quite likely that if they deliver it in 6 months, you're going to pay the price for that truck where the price is in 6 months, not the price that you ordered it at, which is unusual, but it's what's happening. The other thing that's happening price-wise is typically through the winter, mowers are shipped by the truckload or whatnot to dealers, which is much more cost-efficient than 2 mowers shipping at a time kind of a thing. And so you might see in some cases your dealer needing to charge a delivery fee because they had to bring in equipment a couple at a time because there wasn't enough equipment available to bring in larger purchases. So you will see prices continue to climb. I think inflation is not going, exponentially steep, but you will continue to see some inflation creep and overshoot through spring as these prices flow through. Now, the other thing is you're not going to see a huge amount of availability. Yes, there are dealer mowers on many dealer showroom floors. If you're looking for a fleet of all the same model, you probably won't be able to get all those machines, at the same time or the same spec. So coming to the spring, it's quite likely that you might get a different engine option that maybe you would have originally preferred, maybe a different deck size, something along those lines. And I would say that if you wait till April, your chances of getting what you want drop off really steeply. And so part of why I'm talking about this is I want to be sure that you have the best information around what's going on so that you can buy early. We would prefer many of our long-term loyal customers, those of you watching this, having first dibs on available inventory that's out there. And so I would encourage you, even through December, you can also write it off tax-wise if you bring it in earlier. But through December, look at what you're going to need, try to get it in. If it's on back order, that's quite possible. There will probably be certain models that are on back order through spring. But if you wait for it to show up, it might be continuously pre-sold before it sits on the showroom and you see it there. So be sure to get with your dealer that they know what you need long before it comes in. Get those plans underway because come April, there's going to be a lot less options. Another thing along with that is that more than ever before, dealer shops are going to be backed up for repairs. There's going to be less equipment available. Usually when shops are backed up, more new equipment is sold in order to make up some of that so you can keep going. Those are all going to be bottlenecks in your business coming this spring. It's going to be bottlenecks in dealers this spring. So before the spring through the winter, if you have backup equipment, be sure that equipment is up to spec. Make sure everything is maintained well. If you're running your entire business off the mowers that are on your trailers with no backup equipment, that's going to be a little bit risky. I would really encourage you to have backup equipment. Depending on how new your equipment is and how many pieces you have or whatever, that could be somewhere between 5 to 10% of your equipment in backup. Also depends on your dealer. If you have a dealer with really good shop turnaround times, may need a little less or a little more, but I would really be sure that you have some backup options, not just for your mowers, but other items, and your parts. Going to spring, be sure you got the tires you need, be sure you've got a lot of those types of consumable type items that you could end up running into, to be sure that you got everything you need and in your control when the grass is growing like crazy. So hopefully this is helpful to you, helps you understand what we see on the horizon. It's a very strong business environment, which is one of the things that we're thankful for. More than ever before, you have some room to increase your prices because there's less people getting into this business than there are people looking for your services. So be sure that you're charging what you're worth. You want to be doing the premium work as much as possible and getting paid as best as possible. So keep that in mind as well. Hopefully this is helpful to you, and I hope you have a great rest of your winter.